everyone, welcome back to the workshop. So in this video, I'm going to be introducing the blacksmithing community to these new guillotine tools that we are now offering over at our website, www.blacksmithingblanks.com. You can find the link to that down in the description down below. These guillotine tools will be coming as a kit or as a complete set for you to be able to weld up. You will have a die that'll come with it, and you will have all the pieces to make it go, except for your pin, however you choose to do your pin for the lifting mechanism. But we will get into that in the rest of this video when I show everybody how to take and weld this thing up. So this is the single bay guillotine tool, and then this is the double bay guillotine tool. So this actually has double actions, and this is a world's first here. As far as I am aware, I have not been able to find any other people who've ever made something like this contraption in the past. Who knows? Blacksmithing's an old craft, maybe they have. But I'm calling it a world's first nonetheless. So without further ado, let's get right into it, and at the end of the video, we'll show you some of its features and how it works. Okay, so on the left side here, we have laid out all the pieces that comes in the double bay guillotine toolkit, and then on the right we have all the pieces that come in the single bay guillotine toolkit. Now this kit method that I've chosen to do for this particular design is a tab and slot method. So what we use is we actually use a bunch of these T-pieces that go in to the various slots and holes to take and tab in to be welded. What this does is this allows for very quick alignment of everything and clamp up, and then just to be able to weld it. So with just a couple simple clamps, you can get this whole thing welded up, all rigged up or fixtured up and able to weld no problem. So that makes it go pretty quick, in my opinion. So as you can see, you come with a base plate, you come with two side plates. This is for the double bay. You come with a single base plate, you come with two side plates, you have a total of 8 T-pieces, one lever arm, one hammer button, one large 1-inch square hardy, one 5/8-inch square hardy for smaller anvils, and these are size that they will work with the Achaio anvils out there or the Vevor anvils of the 66-pound variety. You have one bolt that the lifting lever arm swings on, and then you come with 2 dies. Now for the single bay, you basically just have half the amount of T-pieces and only half the amount of the dies, but everything else is essentially the same on the single bay. So in the next few minutes here, we're going to take some time to share some tips on how to actually weld this up for those of you who have already purchased this. If you don't want to watch this part, you can skip to the end of the video when we go to doing some forging and showing all of its features. But for the next few minutes anyhow, we're going to be taking a look how to clamp all this up and get it all fixtured quickly to be able to weld it up and share some tips there.
So we offer this in a welded out model, and so I just wanted to show you guys a little bit of what I do. Now these little T-pieces, they do come off the plasma cutter. They are not laser cut, so they're not always a perfect 90. So when you come in here, you can see that there's a slight little gappage, and it's just from this not being a perfect 90. So I just like to use a angle grinder, brand new one, just come in here and do a little bit of cleanup. So right here, now that we have a nice, clean, tight fit is what we want. We want that to meet nice and flush. So here we are, we're going to weld up the hardy stem to the base plate. You have 2 options. You can choose either center, left, or right, but one of these will always be open. We did that so you can take something and knock a die out. When this is all assembled, we'll show you that. So in this model, I'm going to choose the center, just like that's how I like. It's nice to have some little magnetic triangles to square everything up and get it nice and square. The squarer you can get this, a lot nicer job you are going to have. So we just set a couple small little tacks just in there to check it, and we will go back and verify that we are truly 90, which we are. Looks beautiful. Now for the full plug weld. And there you have it, fully plug welded. Now we're just going to take it over to the grinder just to clean it up. Also, quick note, the main reason why we did do a plug weld versus a fillet weld is so when this goes into the anvil, it doesn't have anything to bite on. And we want to have a nice, good penetration on there, so that's why we did a plug weld. So now we're going to actually set up the body of this guillotine tool. We just put our little pieces on, take our die. That makes a really nice spacer. I like to hang my one edge off just a little bit so then I can put a clamp on. And so you come in here, and I like to go tight by this piece right here by the tab, so then I'm not worrying about pulling it down. So I'll just clamp this in, just like so. And then you can rock it up on end and get your other pieces in. The one thing you do want to make sure is that these are setting nice and flush. So if you got a nice welding table, it works out good. You just grab a hammer. I do have a little bit of a trapezoid situation going on right now. So I can just back off these just a fuzz and clamp, set my crossbar in and clamp down. There we go. And do the same thing with the other side. Just like that. Clamp them down. And this is where you can also see your fitment up of your die, so you don't have too much slop going on in there. And if you do have a little bit of slop, you can just file these down just a bit in there so you can actually tighten up this direction. So if that is your case, if your die is a tad too sloppy side to side, you can adjust that. So I just come in, give these a nice tap just to make sure they're in there good. So then I like to rotate these up just a little bit, because now I need to add my base on. And see how nice and easy that is moving back and forth. I do have a little bit of plate this way, but that will be taken care of in a future scene here to pop those in. But my side to side isn't too hateful. I then come over here. I really liked how that was setting. I can take my die out. Big thing, wear gloves. Things can get a little hot when you're welding. But right there, that nice tab design lines that up nice and flush with you. And you just take a look down these edges here and make sure they're nice and flush. So that looks really nice. I like the way that looks right there. So now I'm just going to set a couple little tack welds here on the bottom just to help hold all this together. Right there, like I said, just a couple little tacks. We will come back through and fully weld those in, but just a couple tacks just to get that started. Now, with that all being said, I can still take my die, slide it in, and like I said, I'm really liking how that looks. So now I can actually tack weld in my two pieces here. Making sure everything is nice and flush. And those are nice tacked in. Now I come over, set it with everything being flush, and you can take any rod, anything like you want, just to come down in here and give these other little tabs just a little bump, so that takes out your side to side action. So now that that's all tapped in nicely, I like the side to side action. With that, there's not too much jiggle. Now I will be going and just tack welding these little pieces on each side so you can then maneuver around. So just a little tack weld on both sides, and you'll be good to start fully welding this thing up. And there we have it, all welded up. Now we will take it over to the grinder and clean up all our tack welds here and stuff like that. Smooth everything out nice and neat. Now that we just got done with the guillotine portion, now all we have to do is weld on the hammer button to the lever, and this is what they look like. A nice little slot and tenon there. So we just put that on and get that welded up. And there we have it, fully completed, nice and welded. So now let's test our nice lever.
Okay, so now that you've got this all welded up, the only thing that's left is to take and make up your die. Now, making up your die is going to be a two-stage process. The first stage in making up your die is going to be cutting it and grinding it. So you want to cut and make up your die however it's going to be. Now, my suggestion is you take a measurement from the base here, from the top of the base here, and you measure up 3/4 of an inch. No more, no less. Measure up 3/4 of an inch and go ahead and scribe you a line across there, and that's where you're going to want to take and cut your die initially. Now, different die designs may require you to cut at different heights or whatever to accommodate your needs, but it is my suggestion of at least 3/4 of an inch up from the bottom. Don't go too high though, because then you won't be able to get the bottom die out. Between the top and the bottom here of the opening. So that's stage one of die creation, is you want to get this cut at about 3/4 of an inch up, and you want to get all of your stuff done. So if this is going to be a butcher die, that means you're going to have this cut on a saw cut on an angle, or let's say this could be a tenoning die or a fuller or whatever. You're going to want to make sure that you do all of that work first before you drill your hole for your pin for your top die. And then you drill your hole for your pin for your top die, and then you will have the correct height that this needs to ride and set down here at the bottom of this notch when this die is in use. So as you push up on this lever here, that'll raise it, and you'll have plenty of die that'll be able to come up through here. And then when it lowers, you won't be sitting on here with a gap open where you could potentially bash and bend that pin. So that's kind of how you set the height of your pin for your die. Okay, so in this example, you can see I've got the double bay guillotine tool sitting on Olga here. And I want to take and show you how these pin locations are supposed to look in relation to the dies. So as you can see, I can freely move this up and down and get that to be all dropped out. And these end up touching before the bottoms of these pins bottom out into those yokes or those hewed out spaces. And that's really what you want. You do not want this to take and, come down and it be hanging up here, and then you go bashing on it and then you bend these pins. So I'm just trying to reiterate that's why it's important to cut your die first, because it's going to shrink your material in this direction. If you do any sort of grinding or rounding to it, it's going to shrink it even more in that direction. So you need to create the shape of the die first, of the top and bottom half of the dies first, before you create where you're going to take and drill your pin location or your pin hole. When this die is fully closed, you do want that hole to be at the bottom of that U. What this does for you is this stops, I'll flip this around, this stops this lever arm from slipping off your dies. Now this particular die, depending on how high you lift it up, obviously this front die is completely retracted up into the guillotine versus this back one's down still a little bit more. But I can lift this up high enough that that die can drop down and completely, drop down past this lever, and now I have an issue, right? I can't come back down on it. So that is something to keep in mind when you're designing your own dies for this. Now, this particular guillotine tool, for my example here that I've been using in my shop, I just took a carriage bolt, ran it through there, and threw a little nylon lock nut on there of sufficient length. I think this was a total of 2 inches long, this carriage bolt was, and that's fine for, you know, demonstration purposes. But what I will most likely be doing myself with my own tooling here is I will be running a pin through here and slightly upsetting it in the hole, so that way the pins are permanent and I don't have to worry about them slipping off, or I don't have to deal with these bolts, you know, moving in and out on me. But again, this is for an example. I wanted to see how well that would work out for somebody, and I decided that putting a pin through there and upsetting it slightly will be a lot better use case scenario. As far as the size or diameter of the pin, it just needs to be able to slip between the slots here with having a little bit of wiggle room and a little bit of play without too much fuss. If it's really fussy and finicky and tight, that's a bad thing. You don't want anything to wedge. You want it to be able to move quite freely. So as you can see with this design, you can just pull out whatever die you want and replace it with whatever kind of die you want. So I'm just taking out a tenoning die that way. It's just like any other guillotine tool. You can drop in whatever type of die combo set that you want. You can take out the back one while the front one's in. And this is really starting to kind of showcase you how feature rich this guillotine tool really is here, how you can mix and match this. Now, my personal favorite out of the two, the one we welded up in the video, is a single bay guillotine tool. Now, the double bay is just like the single bay. You just duplicate the step of welding in the T pieces behind. So you put 2 dies in the associated T pieces versus just the 1 die in the associated T pieces. That being said, you can see that with the double bay guillotine tool here, you can see how you can have a lot of advantage of putting multiple stages of dies in one tool. One of the added, maybe unforeseen benefits is if you pull out those dies, the back die, now you have an extra deep throat guillotine tool to really be able to get into the center of some pieces to give you a lot of extra reach. And I find this to be super handy. And so that is my preference right there. I know this guillotine tool is going to get probably, I would say, the most amount of use in my shop, period, out of all of my tools in my shop. This thing is definitely going to be my go-to at all times, just because of how handy having 2 dies are, you know, all set up for you to begin with. So that's it about the setup process, things like that. If you have comments or questions, you can always email them to me over at our website. The contact email is down in the description, as well as the link to go, you know, check out these guillotine tools for yourself. Again, they are a newly added product to the website, so be sure to check those at www.blacksmithingblanks.com. That's where you can find them at. Again, that link's down below. But without further ado, now let's go ahead and get into the using of these dies and do a bit of fun forging and see what we can do.